Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's session is the Intro to SAP Fiori. My name is Thomas Michael and I'll be presenting the session for you today. I've been in the SAP world for over 20 years and I am the CEO of the Michael Management Corporation. We're the leading provider of online SAP training and education, something we're very passionate about. We like to share SAP knowledge with the community. I write a lot. I wrote a book and I write a blog. I also speak a lot at national SAP conferences. I enjoy that a lot. So if you're ever at a conference and you see me speak, by all means, come up and say hi. I always love to meet new people. And here's my email address, tmichael@michaelmanagement.com. Feel free to contact me. I answer every email I get, and I'll always give you my 2 cents if you have any questions. And with that said, let's get into our session. It's going to be a quick session. I think we can cover it in about 20 minutes. We'll have a few minutes to answer questions if you have any. And I want to give you just a taste of SAP Fiori. I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't want to get into any technical stuff with you today. I just want you to understand what Fiori is, the background story about it, learn a little bit about what it does or can do for you. We'll take a look at the basic interface together. And if you feel like you want to learn more about it, I'll share 2 links with you at the end of the session. All right, so SAP Fiori overview and introduction. So what is Fiori? It is a browser-based user interface for SAP. So you can just start a web browser, log into Fiori, and you can then work and interact with SAP software. The idea is that instead of going to the regular ERP system with your regular old SAP GUI that you probably use now, you can instead use that new Fiori tool. SAP announced it in 2013. It was actually released in 2014. So it's been around for about 3 years now. A common misconception about it is that you have to be on S/4HANA. That's not true. It runs on ECC as well. And SAP says that it's free for SAP customers. So I'm not a license expert, but I spoke to one. And the answer that I got, is it really free for SAP customers? And his answer was yes and no. You know, Fiori is free, but you still need licensed users for the NetWeaver gateway. So the analogy that I got is if you have a gas station and you say, if you drive up in a Toyota, you get free gas. Well, then yes, the gas is free, but you still need to buy a Toyota to get the gas. So I thought it was kind of funny, and I think that makes it clear that, yeah, well, Fiori is free. It's not free, but that's probably something that your SAP account manager can explain much better than I could. Fiori supports HTML5. That's about as technical as I want to get today. What it means is it runs on mobile devices, right? So obviously it runs on your normal computer, your desktop, your laptop, but it also runs on tablets and mobile devices, phones, your iPhone, for example, or your Android phone. So when people hear that, they get really excited and they say, oh, so that means Fiori is responsive, right? It's a responsive tool or app. And that's how SAP markets it too. Now, I always put a little asterisk next to it when I hear this. For example, our training courses, we do a lot of hands-on training courses where you get to click the buttons, fill out the fields. It's a real hands-on simulation. Well, technically, these training courses that we create, they're also responsive. They will run on your phone. But practically, it's not very usable because the screen is just not big enough to click on the little buttons and the fields. So that's why whenever you hear something is responsive, take it with a grain of salt. I much rather call it adaptive, right? It adapts to your screen size, which doesn't always make it usable, if that makes any sense to you. But the point is, it does run on all different devices and different screen sizes and will adapt to the screen size. So I like to think of SAP Fiori as a lightweight SAP user interface, right? You won't be able to do everything with it, but certain things. Which brings up the next question. A lot of people say, ooh, SAP Fiori will totally replace the regular SAP GUI access. And a lot of people talk about this, and that sometimes it's marketed that way. I think nothing could be further from the truth. I don't see that happening for a very long time, and I'll show some of the reasons in the next few slides. So I don't think it's a replacement for the SAP GUI. It's an enhancement. It's an add-on tool. It makes certain things easier, but the bulk of the work still gets done through the regular GUI, at least for the time being. A few more stats or fascinating facts about Fiori. It supports multiple operating systems, like I said, so Windows obviously, but also mobile operating systems, and it does both. So iOS, iPhone, and Android. Also comes in multiple languages, which is always nice. And SAP delivers Fiori with a certain number of apps. All right, applications or these tiles that I'll show you in just a second. Now, these apps, right, they cover all areas of your company. You know, there's finance apps, there's other apps related to logistics, there's HR related apps, and so on. And I wrote down here there's over 1,000 of these apps available, but I put an asterisk next to it because while I was researching this session, I had a really hard time finding accurate numbers as far as app count goes. I read some information that said there's about 100 or so apps out there. I read other information that was talking about a couple of hundred. If you go to the SAP websites, they say there's, I think the highest number I saw was 1,200 apps. So I don't know what the real count is. But I think the point is that there's quite a few, and SAP is working on more and more apps. The list, I think, is ever growing, and they are releasing new ones. And of course, you can create your own apps too in Fiori. Now, let me share a couple of screens with you. First, I'll start out with the good old ECC user interface, right? So this is a screen that you're probably very familiar with. It's the regular SAP GUI screen. And this screen, for example, is a good example of what we call a data dense screen. Can't do that right now, but I'm guessing there's probably 20, 25 fields or so on this screen tab. But notice, this is the change material transaction, by the way. So there's probably 25 fields on this tab, but there's a bunch more tabs here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the list goes on. If you do the math, there's probably 3, 4, maybe 500 fields available when you change a material master record. So that's what we call a very data dense screen. Here's another example. Trailer management. This screen has even more screen elements. Look at every one of these fields, right, is a screen element. Every one of these buttons does something. Some of these buttons have a drop-down menu. So there's literally hundreds of screen fields and screen objects on this screen. So Fiori aims to present information in a much less cluttered fashion. So here is a sample screen from the Fiori interface. You've probably seen this, right? So this is that new look that Fiori has. It has all these tiles, right? Or we call them apps, right? And it looks much less cluttered. And then when you click on any one of these tiles, something happens. It opens up. You start the app, all right? And an app could look like this. There's an example. This one is viewing sales orders. All right, and notice how these screens are very clean, very modern looking. Again, they're browser based, so this is the screenshot off a web browser. They're mobile friendly, so this would also display on your phone. So it's much easier to navigate, but there's not as much information on there. All right, so that's the trade-off between the GUI screens and the Fiori screens. That's what I said. Just because it runs on a mobile phone doesn't make it as useful as the GUI screen is. There's a difference there. Okay. All right, so let's actually take a look at the basic Fiori interface, or what we call the Launchpad. The Fiori Launchpad, think of the Launchpad as the home page of Fiori. And there's two ways how you can start the Fiori Launchpad. First one is, since it's a browser-based tool, you just open your web browser and you can just type in the URL of your Launchpad, or much easier, if you're logged into an SAP system with a regular GUI, there's a transaction called /UI2 for user interface second generation, UI2 / FLP, Fiori Launchpad. If you type that transaction into your SAP GUI window, it will launch the Fiori Launchpad, just like that. And then once you're in there, it will look something like this. And I say something like this because everybody's Fiori Launchpad will look different. The Fiori administrator, or maybe your basis administrator, depending on who owns this role, will set up a default Launchpad based on user roles. Okay, and Ahmad, you had a question. Is the Fiori interface customizable? Good question, and yes, it is. And this is what I'm actually going to talk about right now. So the Fiori administrator sets up this Launchpad based on user roles. That means, for example, if you are a purchasing agent, you will probably see tiles related to purchasing first. For example, how to create a purchase requisition, or converting a purchase requisition to a purchase order, approving a purchase order, reviewing a goods receipt, reviewing an invoice receipt, all those transactions related to purchasing. Now, if I am an accountant and I log into my Launchpad, I won't see those tiles because they don't apply to me or my job. I will see different kinds of tiles that are more related to accounting transactions. Okay, so you will have a default Launchpad, but you can also customize your Launchpad. Now, so everybody can modify and personalize the Launchpad. For example, you could, maybe there are some tiles on there, some apps, that even though they apply to your role, you actually don't use them, right? So you can hide those tiles. You can remove them from your Launchpad. Or vice versa. Maybe there are certain tiles that are not on your default Launchpad, but you want to add them. You can do that too. As long as you have the permission to do so, you can add tiles to your Launchpad. You can also change the order of the tiles, and you can also group tiles into sections, screen sections. So for example, there's two screen sections here on this screen, right? You see the global cash manager, and then it has all the tiles right here, and then it says bank account management, has a few tiles here. If you wanted to, you can set up a third section and move some of the tiles into that. So you can totally customize the Launchpad. And again, you can create your own apps too, and they can appear here on your Launchpad as well. So let's talk about apps. There is three types of apps, or these tiles, right? The first one are transactional apps. And as the name suggests, they run transactions. So think of, create a purchase order, change a vendor master record, display an account balance, post an invoice. Those would all be examples of transactions in SAP, right? And that's one group of apps. The second type of apps are analytical apps, the one right here in the middle. They display metrics or key performance indicators in a visual format. right? Think of these charts and graphs. That's what analytical apps do. They don't run a transaction. They display key metrics. And then the last one is the app here on the right. Those are factual apps. So they don't run transactions in SAP, nor do they display analytical data. They're more used to display fact sheets or maybe a product information sheet, any kind of contextual information that you want to attach and that you want to be able to review. Okay, so those are the three types of apps. And also, these apps can either be static or dynamic. Okay, and I'll show you what that means. Here's the Launchpad, and here's an example of two static apps. Notice the tile here, make bank transfer. There's nothing in this tile that will ever change. This tile will always look like this. That's why it's called a static app. It will always look like this, will never change. As opposed to a dynamic app. Notice these two apps. They have a number here. Now this number is generated dynamically. That means it updates automatically without you having to do anything. It does so in regular intervals. And these intervals are actually stored inside the app. Some apps might update every 5 minutes. Other apps might only update once a week. It depends on the information that they display. So if the information that you display doesn't really change much on a day-by-day basis, then the app doesn't have to update every 5 minutes. Makes no sense, right? So based on the information displayed in the app, it automatically updates in intelligent intervals. Here's an example of transaction apps. All right, so these two, for example, track bank transfer. If I would click on this, it would run the transaction for tracking bank transfers for me. Right, it executes a transaction in SAP. And the other one was the analytical app. These two here. Notice how they display information in a graphical format and a visual display. Right, this one here is the liquidity forecast, for example. So they don't run a transaction per se in SAP. They display a key performance indicator or some other metric that I want to track. Okay. So this gives you a taste of what Fiori is, where it came from, how it applies to your work in SAP. I hope that all made sense. If you think you want to learn more about Fiori now, there's two links that I want to share with you. We have two training courses that go into more detail than I just shared with you. The first one is the SAP Fiori End User course. It's basically what I just did, but it goes further and deeper. And the second one is the Intro to Fiori App Development course. That's the next one then. So if you want to get into developing your own apps, this would be the course where you start. You start by modifying existing apps, and then the next step would be to actually develop your own apps. Now, both of these courses are available on our site. I think they're about an hour or less, so they're actually very easily digestible courses. And we'll share these slides with you so you don't have to write this down. Quick summary of the session: 6 things that you should remember about Fiori. It is a browser-based user interface, supports all main operating systems, Windows and Apple iOS and Android, and you can run Fiori on any device, including mobile phones. You start Fiori or the Fiori Launchpad either directly with a URL in your browser, or you just run that transaction UI2/FLP, Fiori Launchpad, from inside your SAP system. SAP delivers about 1,000 or so apps right now out of the box. That list keeps growing, and you can, of course, either modify these existing apps to meet your needs, or you can create your own apps from scratch. Absolutely possible. Apps come in three types: transactional apps that actually run a transaction in SAP, analytical apps that display analytical data, metrics, key performance indicators in a visual format, and then the last app type is the factual app that displays contextual information, fact sheets, product information, that kind of stuff. Now, also remember that apps can either be static or dynamic. All right, static meaning they'll never change. The little tile always looks the same, whereas dynamic apps display information on the tile, and that information actually changes in regular intervals. And then last but certainly not least, you can modify or customize your Launchpad homepage by changing the app order. You can remove or add apps. You can create your own groups, change them. And with that, we have a few minutes left for some questions. And if you can't think of a question right now, but think of one later today, you can certainly reach out to me and contact me. Here's my email address again. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me there too. And I appreciate you guys connecting today. I hope you found this session useful. It was quick enough to attend, and have a great rest of this week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.